Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
We've recently spent quite a lot of time driving from one place to another.
Yes, way too much time.
We got some parts to finish a few projects off today. The really exciting thing, I think, for both of us is we have all the pieces to put the wax injector together, except for a table to put it on.
Right, they were out of the tables we wanted. We'll make do with another table for now.
So it'll probably come in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll get it, and then it'll be in the final configuration.
Right. Well, I'm gonna check the workshop, the studio, to see if I have anything there that I could trade out at least temporarily.
Last month we did a show in response to Pure Living for Life. They requested that people who believe in fighting cyberbullying and bullying in general participate, which we did. And so that there's no doubt, what do you think about cyberbullying?
I think it's horrendous.
There's no place at all for cyberbullying or bullying in real life. Not that cyberbullying isn't real life, because it is for a lot of people.
Right. The advantage to cyberbullying versus bullying in real life is you got to go to the bus stop, or you got to go to that, and they're there. You can't necessarily avoid them. Cyberbullying, should you choose to turn off your media, you can avoid.
No. There's a really bad thing that happens with social media, and that is really insidious. It's horrible. You might not think about it, but social media doesn't put any value on truth.
No.
It rewards engagement, likes, subscribes, all those kinds of things, but truth has nothing to do with it.
Oh, absolutely nothing. You know, if I was selling on Etsy or on eBay or any of those other things, and I started getting terrible reviews, that organization would come to me and say, "What's the problem here?" You know, I did get a bad review once on Etsy, and they asked if I wanted to have the review removed. And I thought about it for a while, and I said no, because the person's commentary was so absurd that anyone who read it, and it turned out to be the best billboard I could have ever bought, because people would read that and they go, "This guy is a jerk." Hi.
You're not supposed to be here.
No,
again.
You're not supposed to be on the tables. Ever. Anyway, she's been very clingy lately. She misses her buddy Jack.
Well, we all miss Jack. I think we have to put her down so that your microphone picks you up.
Oh, that's true. You're probably sitting on my microphone, so you'll hear instead of me. That might be okay, I guess.
There's a really interesting psychological impact on most people's lives. Watching social media or listening to the radio, watching TV, reading a newspaper. The more you see negative comments being placed wherever, the more you start to believe them. Now, that was a favorite propaganda technique of the Nazis. World War II Nazis.
Yep. They figured out that if you say something enough times, people will start to believe it. Even if initially they go, "That's absurd, that's ridiculous, that's not true, I know it's not true." If they hear it enough times, it kind of comes in the back door of their brain, and before you know, they've accepted it as a fact.
You can have a lot of not good things happen on any social media platform, but YouTube is one that can really provide a lot of fertile ground for people who are trying to be mean-spirited. You can talk about my age, or you can talk about the fact that I have earrings. You could talk about the way I talk. And she's going to come over again.
You know better. Don't do it. Back up. She's my mom. You were sitting on the sofa a minute ago. I'll be back there later.
Where was I?
The mean things that people could say.
People can say really mean things and false things on social media. You can say that a particular person is a communist, if that's a bad word.
Yeah.
You can say that a person is a Democrat, if that's a bad word, or a Republican, or an independent, or any political affiliation you can think about.
Right.
All designed to divide a population up and to get people to side with them.
I think this goes in nicely with that quotation that I pulled off of that YouTube video earlier. The gentleman was sitting there with the guy, I think his last name is Gates, who runs that, it's based on the 23andMe sort of stuff. It's your family tree. And when it comes down to is most people, if they were to know the real details of their family tree, would be less than proud by modern standards. And in this case, they pointed out to this gentleman, who seems to be a pretty respectable, nice person in real life, that one of his ancestors had actually testified against people in the Salem witch trials and said, yes, they're witches, yes, they're bad people, they're this, that, the other thing. And of course the guy was horrified.
It was actually the actor Jeff Daniels. And yes, he was horrified.
Right, but what he said was that a mob is where people go to take a break from their conscience. And media can be just like that. You think about the things that people say on media. There's very few people who have the, I'm thinking of all the impolite terms, the bravado, how's that?
Temerity.
Yeah, to come and say those things to your face. Oh yeah, it happens in barroom brawls. We've all seen that. That mob mentality, that go along with the crowd mentality. And all of a sudden, everything, because the whole crowd is saying it's okay, that makes it okay, whether it is or not. And in your heart of hearts, if you were to be put someplace quiet and you had to think about it, you'd be horrified. But you go along with it because that's what the crowd is doing.
You know, people are very much a crowd animal. There are neuroscientists, those are people who study the way the brain works, who tell you that thinking is a mob activity, that no one person can know everything. And that's a fact, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
So you take cues from those around you. And there's good and bad with that. The number of times that we've run into somebody who believes something that is easily proven to not be true is quite remarkable. Smart people can do dumb things.
Oh, yeah.
And that happens all the time. What I would encourage you to do is don't immediately repeat a fact. Remember, a fact could be true and a fact could be false. Don't immediately repeat a fact if you're not sure that it's correct.
Right.
It does no one any good if you simply repeat something that is bogus information. There's plenty of examples in the last 10 years of people repeating bogus information that causes a lot of trouble for a lot of people. So just don't do it. Intuition is a really good thing. Some people have a fine sense of intuition. They have a really fine way, really finely tuned way of dealing with information that requires you to make an intuitive leap. Well, there's a really simple example to show you how intuition can lead you astray. You know, Emily, I met Emily this last week actually. Her father had 3 daughters. One daughter was named April. The second daughter was named May. What's the third daughter's name? If you're like most people, you're thinking June.
Right.
But you already know the answer.
Yeah, because it was Emily. Emily's father has 3 daughters.
That's not a trick. It's actually a function of the way many people's intuition works. In fact, everybody's intuition works. One of the things that we talk about in gardening is make sure that you have data. Don't just rely on your gut instinct. If you said that I had this many inches of rain over the past 3 months, be sure that you had that number.
Right, right. That's why we have 2 rain gauges, physical rain gauges that actually measure rain in the yard, and then we have a mechanical weather station thing. And they don't always agree. In fact, the rain gauges will usually agree or be very close, and sometimes that can be due to the way the wind's direction's blowing. But the rain gauges don't always agree with the weather station. And I think that's because I think the gathering spot on the weather station is actually, it's insufficient. But you have to spend big bucks to get the fancy weather stations. So unless we win the lottery, we'll stick with the same old weather station.
You know, I was educated as a marketing person, but primarily as an engineer. That's what my main focus in school was engineering. And it was from the time I was in junior high school. Even though you can have an engineering perspective, it's easy to get led astray by people who came before you. I have a very good friend who received a PhD in materials sciences. And his advisor in his PhD dissertation said, where did that number come from? Where did that constant come from? And he had to go back, the student had to go back and find how that information was derived, what the conditions were. You know, the funny thing is, there's a fair number of times when a researcher has discovered, looking back at the historical record, that there were some different circumstances, or the numbers weren't quite right, but there are reasons why it's different. Now, in most of these cases, the difference is pretty trivial, but you know, the same thing can apply in our everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Well, the example of the quotation that I was interested in, I read a book, a history book. It had a cool quotation in it, and I said, I got to track that quotation down. That is a cool quotation. I like that.
Well, that was about what you taste on your tongue?
No, this was about the Vikings.
Oh,
right. So it was a quotation about Vikings, and it was a logical statement about how scary they were, and oh, you know, save us from them, God, sort of thing. And so I wrote the author and said, where'd you get the quotation from? Oh, I got it from this book. Awesome. Thank you so much. I go back to that book. The person who wrote that book made it up. It wasn't a historical quotation. It was a quotation, it's a poetic, you know, from the wrath of the Vikings, you know, Lord save us sort of stuff. And it was totally plausible. It makes sense, you know, the sheer terror of having invaders come to your quaint little village and start stealing stuff and stealing people and killing people and all that kind of stuff. Wow, you know, that it's totally logical. But it's all a farce. It's all a fake. It's not a real quotation. And it would be easy for me to quote that, and then people go, oh, well, she got it from, oh, it's definitely true, she quoted it. It's so easy to be misled.
I will absolutely say is there are a lot of things done on YouTube to catch viewers and engagement.
Yeah.
You know, we've watched Keeping It Dutch for a long time, and we got to Keeping It Dutch because he did a show about playing homesteading. In fact, we did one as well, but
it was kind of a run on that topic. What was the definition of homesteading? Can you be a homesteader if you live in suburbia? You know, what are your limitations? Do you have to have? And his attitude was, unless you had cows and chickens and pigs, you couldn't be a homesteader. And I'm thinking to myself, you don't have enough vegetables in your garden to keep you alive for a week and a half. I've got a whole garden out there that I could support a family of 4 or 5 on if I had to.
So, if Dutch recently said, because he has a lot of comments or thumbnails that rope people in.
Yeah,
and
he's big on that.
His comment was, hey, I'm feeding my family by doing YouTube.
Yep.
So cut me a break. I'm going to put the splashy headlines, the ones that are going to drag you in, kicking and screaming, because I need to feed my family.
Right.
But you watch his shows, and he has that marketing little veneer of fact that relates to his thumbnail title. Well, let's kind of summarize where we are on this whole thing. Is cyberbullying a thing? Yes, it is.
Yes,
is it
very.
a problem?
Yes.
Absolutely it is.
Huge.
Is bullying in person, face-to-face, a problem?
Oh,
yes,
always
it
has
is.
been. Probably since cavemen, at least.
All those things are a fact. Those are true facts.
Yeah.
We don't believe in bullying, whether it's in person or cyber. That's not what we're about, and we think that people ought not be doing it. In fact, if it weren't such a low down on the list for district attorneys to prosecute, I'd be happy to see a lot more prosecutions happen. But the bottom line is, you're not going to get criminal activity when district attorneys are busy trying to figure out which cases they're going to take to court that are easy to prove. And I have to tell you that proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that cyberbullying has happened is tough work. You just look at the problems that Pure Living for Life has gone through trying to prove up their case. It's not easy. It's not cheap. What Alyssa was talking about in that show, that happens. And trying to prove that is really, really difficult. And the takeaway, the clue that they got was being told to go for a civil action. What that tells you, it's sort of shorthand saying the district attorney is not going to take this case.
No. Something that's easy for people to understand. You're providing a physical danger to someone else. The attitude towards cyberbullying is generally, you don't like it, turn your media off.
Yeah, and that's not right. The number one thing is think critically when you read something.
Yeah, if you have it down like I
platform.
did about a fact, and it was put forth as, I mean, it was a well laid out fact, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. I think that the chronology on that, the years that they were talking about was wrong, and the actual event didn't go down like that. But I looked it up.
You know, number one, make sure that you verify those things that just don't seem right.
Yeah.
And don't be quick to pass on. When I was a kid, there were terms for people who passed on information that was gossip. And we're not going to talk about those names, but don't gossip. You know, if you are going to pass on information, make sure the information, to the best of your knowledge and the best of your ability, is valid.
Yeah.
There's no reason to compound problems by saying things that aren't true.
Right. And make sure that if you're passing on information at all, that you've heard it accurately. I mean, when we were kids, they used to play
Post office,
telephone. They called it, you know, it depends on the screen. And they would give a fact to its student at one end of a line, and then they would see what that fact was by the time it got to the end.
Didn't relate at all to what was said at the beginning.
People misunderstood words. People misunderstood numbers. People misunderstood to the point where a lot of times by the time it got to the end, there had been so much, because people were whispering it, the person at the end would say, "What'd you hear?" I mean, it didn't make any sense.
So, well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, because we're going to be doing a lot more stuff, including we'll be setting up the wax injector. I have another piece of equipment to set up that we just got, I think, the last piece for. So we have a lot of things going on. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, I did fix the water today. The leak is repaired. I didn't have to replace any pipes. I didn't have to replace any fittings. And if I'm able to recover some footage, I'll show you exactly what happened.
Right, right.
So with that, thanks for watching. We'll talk with you later.
Bye.
Don't forget to brainstorm.
Because we do.
Everybody should.
Mm-hmm.